Hi everyone, Bear from Bear Reads Books. Welcome back to my channel. Time for an update. I thought another great way to get started and make myself more accountable for my reading as I get back into videos would be to do a March TBR update. So the things that I'm planning on reading for March, that's what I'm going to take you through. It's an ambitious bunch of books and there's a bunch of things going on in March which makes it even more busy. So let's kick off because we've got quite a few books. Now, the few that I mentioned earlier in a previous video, some of the prize stuff I'm reading. I've got Case Study by Graeme McRae Burnett. I'm most of the way through this. I'll probably finish this in the next couple of days. So this also sits in the BookTube Prize. So it's BookTube Prize reading number 1, Case Study Graeme McRae Burnett. It is great so far. Not as good as my other BookTube Prize reading, which is Dr. No by Percival Everett. Now, as I said in my previous video, this is hilarious and intelligent and so engaging. And after following up The Trees, his previous work, which I thought was also great, he's backed it up by something even better. So if you've read The Trees, you liked it, Dr. No is superb, and I find myself laughing out loud all the time. So those two are my BookTube Prize reads for the month of March. But on top of that, there's another prize happening in Australia. The long list has just been announced for the Stella Prize, which is a writing prize for women, Australian women writers, and it can be across any genre. So it's not just fiction, which is great. And the two that I've chosen to kick off my reading, there is a couple I've already read on that list. I'm going to do a separate prize. I'm going to do a separate Stella Prize video once I get a little bit deeper into my long list reading, because I do have a few more on my shelves and one or two that I've already read. So, but I've chosen two from the library. And one fiction and one non-fiction. Some of the only non-fiction I'm going to read this month, if I get to it. We've got, the fiction is The Furies by Mandy Beaumont, and it's the type of fiction that I like. So just even the first sentence on the back tells you the type of book it is. Cynthia is just about to turn 16 when the unthinkable happens. Her mother is taken away by the police, and 3 months later her father leaves without a word. And this sort of gritty, could be mystery, I'm not entirely sure yet, but it could be a lot of things. But this kind of thing where the book talks about the one thing that you can trust disappearing. I really like that concept. In this one, it's the one thing you can trust is your parents, right? And then they disappear or something happens to drag them away. I like those concepts in books, and this one's ended up on the long list of the Stella Prize, so it's obviously got some merit. So that's March Stella Prize reading number 1. March Stella Prize reading number 2 is, as I said, non-fiction. Can't wait for this one. It's called Indelible City by Louisa Lim, with a subtitle of Dispossession and Defiance in Hong Kong. Now, it talks about the uprising in Hong Kong beginning around 2019, before the pandemic hit, and it's written by Louisa Lim, who is a living in Australia, born in Hong Kong journalist and writer, and I'll be really interested to see her take on the uprising and on the situation in Hong Kong in general. It's a subject that I'm interested in. It's great that this particular book got onto the long list of the Stella Prize. And I've got this on audiobook and on physical book from the library, so I'm kind of holding on to both. Sorry if you've booked it out of the library and I'm holding it, but I'm kind of holding on to both. This will be the first spot that opens up, whether it be physical or ebook or audiobook. The first spot that opens up in my schedule, this one can go into either one. And if I'm not using a library book, of course I'll take it back. If I'm going to listen to the audiobook, I'll take this one back immediately, I promise. So they're the two. So we've got two BookTube Prize reads, two Stella Prize reads. There are a couple of readathons happening in March. In fact, all of the readathons seem to happen in March. When I watched a couple of videos this week, Doris from Aldi Books is doing all sorts of readathons. But it did inspire me to choose a couple to form up my reading for the month. So I thought, I'll dive into a couple. Some, questionably, I'm really not sure whether I've bitten off more than I can chew here. One of them is March Murder Mystery Madness or something like that. I really should research the names of these things. There's March Murder Mystery Madness. If it's a March, it's going to be some sort of M word. Now, I didn't, for all of these readathons, I haven't really looked in too deeply to the criteria for each one. But let's just say March Murder Mystery Madness is about reading murder mystery books, right? And if I read one, then that is job done for the readathon. Or if I read as many as I can, or read two, that's job done. Maybe the criteria for some of these readathons is a little bit more specific, but I'm reinterpreting them in my own ways. Apologies to those that create these ideas, they're fantastic. But for me, March Murder Mystery Madness, I'm just going to read a mystery book and I'll tell you about it. That's it. And I've chosen two. So there's two murder mystery books that I'm going to read, or mystery books that I'm going to read. The first one is a really light-hearted one. This is the second book in Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club Mysteries series. I read the first one, it was given to me as a gift at Christmas, and I thought, it's not really my thing. I read it because I had time to read over the holidays, and it was actually really light and really fun. And really, for a mystery, it didn't take itself too seriously, which is fantastic. So this is the second one, and if you don't know what it is, it's about these people sitting around in an old folks' home who decide to form a murder mystery club and solve actual murders. So they get hold of case files and newspaper clippings, and they go through and they're looking for mistakes or holes in a case, and then they're re-investigating cases. And in the first one, it turned out they were investigating a murder that happened in their local area, and they obviously solved the crime, and a couple of people died, and it was all very exciting, but in a funny, light-hearted way, because they're old people sitting in a retirement home. It was quite hilarious. Didn't take itself too seriously. This is number two, The Man Who Died Twice, and I'll be trying to tackle that. They are really easy to read books as well. The second one's a little bit more serious. In fact, it's by a woman called Nikki Mottram, an author called Nikki Mottram, who is a local author. And the reason you're going to see more of this is not something that's available in my local area only. Nikki Mottram has got a 2-book deal with a very large publisher in Australia, so you may see this overseas. And as you know, that there's a lot of mystery and crime writing in Australia at the moment, and a lot of it gets exported, especially to the UK and to the US. So you may see this around the place. But Nikki Mottram is a local author from my local area. The name of the book is Crow's Nest, and Crow's Nest is just over there, about 10 minutes. So this is a real place, and she's created this murder mystery around being a support worker or a child protection worker. So she's a child protection worker that lives in the city where I am, and then she travels to the small town of Crow's Nest just out there to help a family with some child protection issues and to help some children. The second book that she's also signed a contract for already is called Killarney, which is another small town just over there. So it's really great, which will probably be released in the next 12 to 18 months, I'm sure. So it's really great to see local authors writing about local places. And so it's really great that I always call it a little town. It's 120,000 people, so it's not particularly, it's a small city. But it's great to see local people getting published by big publishers, mainstream publishers, but writing about their local area in whatever genre they like. I think that's really, really exciting. So many big city books, so books set in capital cities, are always about capital cities, and it's not so exciting. Go, oh, it's a book about Sydney. Great. Yeah, everything's about Sydney. But when you write about regional areas, many times, like your Jane Harpers and your Chris Hammers, They write about fictional rural towns or fictional regional towns for fear of upsetting a small group of regional people. And that's okay if you want to do that, but Nikki Mottram has done exactly the opposite and written a book talking about Crow's Nest with child protection issues, which is a daring thing to do. So that's what I'm going to read. 2 March Mystery Madness books, which should be fun. The other one is there's one, and again, the name eludes me. Monster. The Monster Reads. So the only criteria for this one is read one book of 800 pages or more, and it's Monster March, maybe Monster March Madness. I don't know. Something to do with Monster. Monster is the size of the book, obviously, with the only criteria being read one book over 800 pages. And I've looked all over my shelves and I don't have anything over 800 pages. I don't want to buy a book over 800 pages. Went to the library and there was everything that was over 800 pages really didn't take my fancy. The 2 books that I read last year that were over 800 pages were both of Yanya Hanagihara's books, To Paradise and A Little Life. I read both of those in 2022. Both of those are over 800 pages. But there is no way I'm picking up either of those books and reading them again. I loved them. They were great. And I can do a separate video about A Little Life and To Paradise if you wish. But considering the subject matter of both of those, I never want to see those books again. As amazing as they were, I just never want to see them again. So what I've chosen is Edward Rutherford's China. And before you start Googling the page count, it is 780 something, which is under 800, but it's all I've got. And it's formidable enough considering I'm reading other stuff as well. This has been on my list for a while. My wife read it and said it was good. We've both read all of Edward Rutherford's books. We like the way he lays out family histories intertwined with the history of a country and all the political machinations and all of the other stuff. We find his writing easy to read, very consumable, but very, very interesting. So Edward Rutherford's China, not quite hitting the criteria, but meh. There is one more readathon, and again, unsure of the title. Let's call it March Madness again. It's middle grade March Madness, if you like, but it's middle grade fiction. And if you've watched my channel a little bit, you know that I read a fair bit of YA, young adult fiction, and middle grade fiction, as well as adult fiction. So I really do mix it up. And I've also done a review of, I talked about an Australian writer called Craig Silvey before, who's written, especially, more than this, but 2 books. One was Jasper Jones, which is YA fiction, and another one which is also billed as YA, which is called Honeybee. Honeybee is the most recent one, and it is heartbreaking stuff. It is quite an amazing book. I cannot recommend it enough, but this video is not about how beautiful Honeybee is. This book is about reading something more of Craig Silvey's work. And for middle grade, I've picked his little book for middle grade readers called Runt. And I don't have a physical copy, put it up here. And yes, you heard that right, and I'll say it very carefully. Runt, R-U-N-T, is the name of the book. And I'm going to read that. I don't know too much about it apart from this Craig Silvey. What I am interested in is how does an author who writes right at the top of the age bracket for YA, how do you adjust, and very dark and gritty stories. Craig Silvey writes very dark, very gritty, and right at the top of YA, so that adults enjoy them. You could read them as a upper high school reader to talk about all sorts of different issues. So how do they adjust their writing style to get back to middle grade fiction and still make it relevant and meaningful for readers, and it's not just an adventure story or it's not just a mystery story. So because Craig Silvey writes really engaging, really topical and very conversation worthy stories, and you would hate to think that he strips it back to middle grade fiction and gets rid of all that. So I'm really keen to see what he does with this book Runt about I don't know yet. So I'm going to read that, middle grade. And I've read a few books recently of people who have started in YA and have made the change to either creating adult fiction or gone the other way and started writing middle grade fiction. And there's some authors that I've read that have always just drifted between the 2 or 3 readerships. And I find it really interesting how they do that. So I'm keen to see it from Craig Silvey's point of view as well, because I really respect him as a writer and what he's trying to do. But they are really hard, gritty books to read for YA if you try and picture it in that age group. So I'm keen to see what he does here. Runt by Craig Silvey. One more outside of a readathon. That's it for readathons. That's it for prizes. I'm trying to tackle this mountain of books behind me, and obviously every time I pick up a book, that's one off my shelf mostly, unless I go to the library. But I wanted to pick at least one off the shelves that wasn't related to all the prizes and all the other things and all the readathons. So this one is just one that's been on my shelves for a while that I keep looking at every time I pass by, and it makes me feel guilty that I haven't read it because it's so beautiful and I paid so much money for it. And that is Will MacPhail's In. And now you can see why I said it was so beautiful. I heard amazing things about this graphic novel, and it's very simple, very beautiful illustrations here, In by Will MacPhail. And as I said, it looks beautiful on my shelf, and every time I pass it by, I say, that looks beautiful, but I haven't read you. So now I'm picking it up, and I'm going to read it in March. I promise. It should be an easy one to tackle as an extra, as something, because it's a graphic novel, and I don't read a great deal of graphic novels. It's just the reception that this one got and the accolades that this one got, something like a National Book Award or something like that, were incredible. So I'm keen to read that. So that is March. How's that for a month? It's ambitious, isn't it? I think it's ambitious. Especially when you throw in just under 800 pages, let's say just over 800 pages, Edward Rutherford's China. When you throw that in, that becomes a really big month. Otherwise, I'd go, yeah, sure, I can do that. But I'll be finished Graham McRae Burnett within the next couple of days. I'll be finished Dr. No probably this afternoon. And then I'm on to the list itself. The couple of mysteries are pretty consumable, they're nice and easy, and then we're into the really meaty stuff. So we'll see how we go. That's it for March. Enjoy your reading month of March, and I hope you've got some excellent things planned as well, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, bye.